Well, we're building an inevitable company. That's our starting point. That needs to happen, right? And we see Speckle's future shine quite bright outside of AEC as well as within AEC itself. Okay, incumbents, if they open up more to make this a better world for their users, that means we can integrate more and better with them. So they end up playing in our game, in a sense, one way or another. Because there's no like direct recipe which we can just pick off a shelf and start applying. So there are like directions in which we can go and take inspiration from this kind of companies, but at the end of the day we need to come up with our own recipe.
Question, but something we always prompt to our either existing or future customers is to think about what is your data strategy, right? So right now you're storing it in files, but in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, do you want it hosted in a proprietary cloud from a vendor that keeps increasing subscription fees every year without delivering real innovation? Or do you want it hosted on open source technologies that you essentially own and can shape the way you want?
Yeah, like AI accelerates you, but if you're doing the wrong thing, it's just gonna accelerate you doing the wrong thing, or help you write more of the wrong thing.
As data-driven design, data-driven workflows are becoming more and more predominant, and here it's basic things where Speckle excels at. So being able to drive a project design or increase margins and productivity by creating very streamlined workflows, and this is where Speckle really excels, because you don't have again to share the entirety of a model, of a project, or a file, but just the bits that you need when you need them and where you need to access them.
Data shouldn't just be like, your design shouldn't just be accessible by specialists only. There's clients, executives who fund these that they also need to call the shots, or at least be involved in the process.
Alright guys, so episode 4, the final episode, and in here we will be talking about the future of design, data, and most importantly Speckle. So Martin, please kick us off.
What is the future of Speckle?
Ooh. Well, I think we need to think about
where you are now maybe and where you want to go.
Yeah. What's the vision?
Well, we're building an inevitable company. That's our starting point. That needs to happen, right? And we see Speckle's future shine quite bright outside of AEC as well as within AEC itself. That's kind of the long-term planning that we're doing and gearing ourselves up for. We can expand, like ultimately 3D data is not a problem just in architecture, engineering and so on. It's a very homogeneous, in a sense, problem that's spread across other industries as well. Like people designing boats need to collaborate together, and shockingly, some of them are using Speckle.
We have seen models of ships and boats in Speckle, or even smaller, rings. If you think about it, a lot of the tools people use with Speckle, like Rhino, are used for naval design, for jewelry design. We have seen medical appliances, I think, a pacemaker once.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3D data is definitely not limited to our industry.
But you would stay within the communication between the software, different software, right?
As far as I know, there's no data infrastructure for the naval industry, right? Automobile, aerospace, so Speckle could become relevant there as well.
How about construction? Just to clarify the question, you mentioned it earlier as well, architecture, engineering. You're missing the C, which is construction. So any plans to get involved there?
Definitely. I mean, to a certain extent, we're already involved. There are a number of construction companies and large contractors already using Speckle, like John Sisk, for example, Suffolk in the US. There's a bunch of them using Speckle for various workflows.
Yeah.
Data visualization, Power BI dashboards, and so on that we've seen. Now, we're focused on where we're relevant, so that's A and E. Both of us know the street there, in a sense. We know the neighborhood, so that's where kind of most of our efforts are going towards right now. But that doesn't mean we are overlooking things outside A and E.
So the way I see it, like you guys exist because there is a very bad data exchange of data in construction, architectural engineering. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way that it will be the industry will be improving it by itself, or there's no trend from incumbents' point of view to kind of tackle this problem?
So there's a funny dynamic at work here. One is, yeah, okay, incumbents, if they open up more to make this a better world for their users, that means we can integrate more and better with them. So they end up playing in our game, in a sense, one way or another. Now, we also see Speckle not necessarily as a solution to, let's say, a bad problem. We also see it kind of as it emerged out of, an existential need for people to communicate. Right? It goes kind of beyond the technological friction that is out there. That's a very big component, obviously, but...
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I think you had a nice question about open source software, the future of data and of our industry. Why?
I think
because it has been the closed source software, right?
Yeah, the industry traditionally has been extremely closed and proprietary, but what we think is it's going to follow the same trend of the wider tech industry, where open source technologies, as we said before, are becoming the prevailing ones, and people are relying more and more because they end up being safer, they end up being more advanced with the times, and better options when you're building infrastructure at the end of the day. Having something open and transparent that doesn't lock you in tends to be the favorable choice for most. So we think the same sort of transformation is happening in AC. If you think companies like Microsoft used to be completely against open source, used to say and present saying open source is something bad that needs to be stopped, but things have changed now. Microsoft is one of the biggest contributors to open source with
because they exhausted the whole
they exhausted their options, and they had to jump on the open source train as well.
Mm-hmm. Because that proved the model, right? Business model, right? Closed software. There was the model that companies can make money on, right? And so I'm just curious, like, your thoughts on the profitability of open source solutions in the future. Yeah.
I don't think we need thoughts here, like when companies like GitLab IPO for like billions and billions. Ultimately, it's a proven fact that it can work. And as always, it's not like a recipe. It's not, maybe it's less, in a sense, there's less historical data on how this can work versus like traditional companies. And that's why it's more of a challenging journey to get there, because there's no like direct recipe which we can just pick off a shelf and start applying. So there are like directions in which we can go and take inspiration from this kind of companies. But at the end of the day, we need to come up with our own recipe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something we, maybe it's not a direct answer to your question, but something we always prompt to our either existing or future customers is to think about what is your data strategy, right? So right now you're storing it in files, but in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, do you want it hosted in a proprietary cloud from a vendor that keeps increasing subscription fees every year without delivering real innovation? Or do you want it hosted on open source technologies that you essentially own and can shape the way you want? And at that point, it's quite an easy choice, right? Mm-hmm. You want it hosted somewhere it can be easily moved, and it's flexible and transparent.
Cheaper as well, I guess, yeah?
Of course.
Yeah.
Is there anything that Speckle can do with the I don't want to use the term customers' data, but obviously you have a lot of data within the platform. Mm-hmm. Is there any plan for monetization of that data from you guys in the future?
Absolutely not. This is something that we state quite clearly in our privacy policies, terms and conditions. We're not accessing, mining, selling, sharing any of our customers' data. So our customers own their own data, and we are only accessing it if they ask us to, or if we need to debug things, or for if our government asks us to investigate anything. But otherwise, we don't.
Very good. Okay, so how about then? We are now living in the age of AI.
Okay.
How are there plans to incorporate perhaps AI within the product, and then also within the company? Like, does it affect how you build the company and processes, operations, how you think about staffing, that kind of thing?
And the last part, it's funny that you asked this because there's just a thread going on in our Discord where it's like, whoever wants access to ChatGPT, please talk with Mo and fill in this form. So internally, yes, everybody's leveraging AI. I think we have yet to see its like full-on impact. I think one of the things that we're cautioning people against is, like AI accelerates you, but if you're doing the wrong thing, it's just gonna, accelerate you doing the wrong thing, or help you write more of the wrong thing. So there's always that level of human or whatever personal discernment judgment that you need to apply. Externally, we've mentioned this before, like companies are using Speckle, whether self-hosted or by us, to kind of like store their data so that they can train AI models on top of that. But that's something that it's within their control. Like our job is to make sure they can do that.
I'll just ask a very broad question. What trends do you guys see within AEC?
Well, it might sound obvious, but I think, basic things as data-driven design, data-driven workflows are becoming more and more predominant. And here it's basic things where, Speckle excels at, so being able to drive a project design or, increase margins and productivity by, creating very streamlined workflows. And this is where Speckle really excels, because you don't have, again, to share the entirety of a model, of a project, or a file, but, just the bits that you need when you need them and where you need to access them. We see more and more companies building technology on top of Speckle. So, advancing, creating, tailoring custom solutions to their needs. This is another strong trend. It might seem obvious, but we see that happening more and more. What else?
It's difficult when you're in the trenches, right? It's a question that forces us to emerge. Yeah.
Another, again, might sound obvious to some listening, but the role of a data visualization, it's becoming more and more relevant. So again, you have these massive Revit files, models, which are essentially, as I said before, databases. And people now realize that, especially thanks to solutions like Speckle, they can visualize it in Power BI or through custom, charting and visualization tools, and really being able to see your project in a more visual way is quite game-changing, because there's a lot of learnings that you can get out of, processing data in a more visual way.
Mm-hmm. When will we see Speckle Ventures creating one of the verticals on top of Speckle?
We are, in a sense, a startup that has multiple startups embedded within it or supporting startups around it. This is something that we have been thinking about at one point, like if opportunistically we can seed more kind of like vertical solution. No concrete plans as of yet. It is interesting, like, because each of these kind of, let's say, change detection, right? Like
change detection, sorry, you said?
Yeah, basically being able to see, what changed between today's model version and yesterday's model version. There are specialist software that do this for you. They cost a shit ton of money. It's a one-click button in Speckle. Now, there's a whole industry built on just that, or like a subset of our industry built on just that functionality. Or model checking designs. There's a bunch of kind of partners that we're looking to essentially move on top of Automate so that they can offer their solutions at scale. It comes to kind of to your earlier question around big trends and so on in AEC. I think people realize that one of the answers to the perceived inefficiencies is just faster, leaner data exchanges and more transparency, because data shouldn't just be your design shouldn't just be accessible by specialists only. There's clients, executives who fund these that they also need to call the shots, or at least be involved in the process.
Mm-hmm. There's a bit of a, I guess, silly joke in construction and architecture even about 3D versus 2D design. Mm-hmm. So will you be developing your product to perhaps tackle 2D design as well?
Yeah, of course, to a certain extent, we're agnostic whether a design is 2D or 3D, right? Okay. It's just one extra axis of complexity, and but technical complexity ultimately. And 2D is an amazing abstraction that works really well for a host of use cases, right? we're not yet fully supporting that nicely in our viewer, but it's just a matter of cosmetics, and actually we will start supporting it better soon.
What is open washing?
Open washing is something...
Where should we start?
Where should we start?
Something
Well,
incumbent.
you take a washing machine. No, it's basically, there's the Open Design Alliance, right? It's a company. It's the essentially
Council.
enterprise. No, they don't solve cancer, but they reverse engineer DWG and a bunch of other formats. Now, just going by its name, the Open Design Alliance, what does that make you think?
We aligned interests of people who are looking into open source design software.
Well, yes, but only if you pay £40,000 a year membership fees or something like this. So
Super open.
this
Yeah.
is open washing, right? And or it's, I mean, they're actually a force of good in the industry. But there's worse examples where, like, Autodesk comes along and says, we're open, we're doing this and so on, but actually you're being charged tokens to use it. Or
I can think of, and I won't mention the name, but a software that, claiming to be open source, but the actual geometry kernel underlying, the software that powers everything it does is not open. You cannot really say that this software is open source, right? It has dependencies that are closed in a way. So
like the useful bits.
the useful bits. There's quite a few of these examples where companies maybe take a bit advantage of the open source name, and they just sell it, but without really delivering proper open source solutions.
And you guys remember there was the letters to Autodesk kind of kerfuffle, right?
By the students or whatever?
No,
no,
not
sorry,
students.
differently. I was
It
talking about Reba.
the whole fucking industry. A proper, legit, big AEC company signing a letter saying Autodesk, we're pissed off at you. Right. 1 year later, Autodesk joins the Open Design Alliance as a kind of a reaction to that, in a sense, to prove that they're actually open and going to make things better. Yeah, just like...
Are they not open source?
Sorry, no.
Autodesk?
No, not really.
No open source.
They're showing they are simulating with the industry, perhaps. Oh.
They have to do it.
It's just sometimes people make noises that others want to hear, but they just...
Yeah.
Okay. Where do we go now?
I was gonna say, just maybe on the incumbents point. Does it make sense for these people to develop tech in-house versus using third-party tech providers like Speckle, maybe not Speckle, or others within the architecture space? Because we had one on the podcast recently, and me personally, I was quite surprised to hear that they didn't really use external providers, and a lot of the tech was developed in-house, and the argument was that it gives them a competitive edge. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, that's basically, we have a very simple question, there's a nuanced answer to this as well. But ultimately, you as an AEC company, are you competing on who produces the best pencils? Or are you competing on who produces the best designs and the most cost-effective, let's say, overall project, right? So if you want to compete on building pencils, then okay, it makes sense for you, but then maybe you should consider yourself as a software company, not as a kind of AEC company, right?
Exactly what Dimitri was saying. I think from my own personal experience, what I've seen multiple times is that's the impression that companies get, of being, ahead of the curve, being so advanced technologically, but ultimately it's more kind of for marketing purposes, for, visibility, branding, rather than actually having an edge over the competition.
No substance, yeah?
Yes, you said it, but yes, there are many instances of that, and I personally believe that instead building on top of existing solutions, especially if they're open source, would be a much better use of their resources and time, instead of having to recreate the wheel, over and over multiple times.
Yeah, and look, I think we take a more generous view on this setup actually, because both of us more or less have been there in a sense of building this internal software that companies use. We think, okay, there's a bunch of creativity and daringness inside these AC enterprises, that just exists and like wants to explode out. They want to code. They want to be kind of cutting edge, which is amazing, right? And we're actually there to serve that need and amplify it.
Exactly, and there's usually a big difference between developing a script or a proper software, enterprise software that can be deployed company-wide. So many times we see, great motivation, great resources, great skills in coming up with a solution, but then it falls through the cracks in, making it enterprise ready, scalable, compliant, and durable over time. What I've seen in a few companies, amazing product, blah, blah, blah. The key engineer, key employee leaves and they don't know what to do with this solution anymore.
I mean, there's a whole graveyard filled with these really quite literally amazing tools for their time. Like there were a couple in Arab when we were there. There were a couple in Foster's. There's plenty that exist. I've gave birth to some of them. Matteo gave birth to more of them, and there's been others who gave birth to more of them.
Other orphans.
Yeah, exactly. But that's true. They end up like kind of orphan solutions with a very ultimately frustrated, let's say, father or like originator, because like, the project's over, like basically your budget's gone, you will not get continuous investment in making that tool applicable to other projects.
Exactly.
Right?
Operationally, these companies are not prepared or designed to carry on software projects as they do for building projects, construction projects. They don't have,
That's not their core. Yeah?
Exactly. And so even, maintaining, keeping them up to date and progressing is not something that, they're handling very well at the moment. I can think of just very few instances.
So the reason for that is just because they are building on like a closed source software, or if maybe there was like a base layer of open source, and you could build on this, that it will be more manageable.
There's a certain scalability of what you do and the scripts that you operate on. Like they will work for a project, then you'll want to apply them to another project. They'll need customization. They'll need, okay, now suddenly you need to add permission management. It's a whole body of work that kind of nobody does. And then, we want to share this with the client and so on. Like there's like, let's say, production ready software that you need to handle like tens of thousands of users like Speckle does now. Is a whole different game from the script that you've developed locally. Right. So with Speckle, what we're trying to do is kind of enable these folk to essentially say, okay, all the boring shit's taken care of. Now you can like use this as a kind of springboard for your domain expertise.
Okay, so maybe just to wrap up this series we've done with you guys, by the time this airs, you would have publicly announced your Series A.
Yes.
So it has been raised already, for the record, but the announcement will come out around about the time that this is released. What will the Series A enable you to do that you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise? And what is the future plans, as that's the theme of the episode, with this capital?
Yeah, as always, you only raise money if you want to put it to good use. But our plans for essentially the Series A post is like crack on with monetization and then start scaling ideally outside of AC. And
the product is there, right?
Sorry?
The product is there.
The product is there and is being built there. Now there's a lot more to build. So like 80% of the value that Speckle can provide is still ahead of us. And that's again what this money is for.
So sales, marketing,
growth,
R&D mostly.
Any thoughts on how big the team might become?
Right now we are at 28, right? We don't want to, grow unsustainably, so we are trying to pace ourselves a bit, but
we're very scrappy. So, like, I mean, this is something that some investors appreciate, some don't. But like, ultimately, we're very scrappy. Like, we want to grow sustainably and throw money on the fire when we know that it's gonna boil water. In a sense.
Very nice.
Right. So we're in a sense graduating now from the garage startup that we used to be to something with more structure, hierarchy, and scalability in terms of development and growth.
And I think you can say the same about the product. We've demonstrated product market fit. Right now, what we're building, what we're gonna use these resources for, is to make it kind of enterprise ready, really adding a lot of the features we were discussing before around security, compliance, that large companies have been asking for for a while now.
I wanted to ask you, as founders, co-founders, software like Speckle, does it go public or does it get sold?
What do you
We'll
think?
go public, yeah. They will definitely go public, or at least this is our plan. Right, because we don't see the opportunity there just for AC or, like companies like Spacemaker, right? They really restricted themselves to early stage design, blah, blah, blah. So then essentially the exit that they had is a good exit, basically acquisition. Speckle is ultimately infrastructure. All the world's data pertains to the built environment should flow through Speckle, and that's not acquisition material in a sense.
Okay. What's the? I will have to ask about this because everyone talks about this, and that's future. Apparently, AI and future of design.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
We've seen
Because
really
why can we not have a software in 6 months that will write Speckle 2.0 and Speckle 1.0 will not be necessary anymore?
Look, anything is possible. I think where I've seen quite encouraging results so far is a lot on the visualization side of things. We've actually been collaborating with a early stage startup called Gendo. They use AI to create realistic visualizations, renderings of buildings, right? So that's definitely a space that can be extremely successful. We've seen generative examples, especially on the 2D side of things, but I think
Less successful.
a bit less successful on 3D.
And is, for example, Gendo or all the generative rendering things out there, like, do they replace like the master craftsman renderer? No. They just enable more people to do more renders more efficiently. So they essentially are creating new markets rather than replacing existing ones.
What about design as you speak rather than click?
Architects and so on. Maybe it will work, maybe not. We don't know. I think there's not enough good data and a good way of encoding that data to get to like a fully automated architect, let's say.
When these conversations start, I usually like to bring us back to the reality, to the problems of people nowadays. So yes, maybe we'll have AIs that can do all these cool things, but engineers are still struggling getting their ETABS models into Revit, right? So yes, we can have all these cool things, but we feel like there's much more serious and hard problems that still need to be solved, and we don't want to get distracted in a way. So it's nice to think about the potential ahead of us, but the reality is that there's still a lot of work to be done on.
Plus, there's no way AI can build the community you guys have.
Who knows? Maybe yes, but maybe it's going to be a community of other AIs talking to each other.
Yeah.
It's like...
Cool. All right, guys. Well, we won't keep you much longer. Sounds like you've got some cash to burn. Well, thank you, Dimitri. Thank you, Matteo, Senda, and Jonathan for joining us today. Any closing words from you, Martin, to wrap the series up?
Thank you.
A pleasure.